Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from Forum Energy Metals. Forum is traded on the TSX.V under the ticker FMC and on the OTCQB under the ticker FDCFF. And we're joined today with the Vice President of Exploration for Forum Energy, Dr. Rebecca Hunter. And Rebecca, it's great getting you back on the show. We just talked 2 weeks back, and we were looking at the tail end of the drill program at the Tadagac area, and you had expanded mineralization there. And coming into the season, I think some people thought you were just trying to make discoveries at these targets that you're going after, but really with Tadagac, you were stepping out from known mineralization, but a lot of historical work had been done by Cameco when you were there, and you were really expanding the mineralization. Today, we're going to talk about the Qavvik target, also at your Aberdeen Uranium Project in the Thelon Basin, but in this case, it's a similar story in that there's already been some historic work done when you were at Cameco on this Qavvik target. This is a basement-hosted target for uranium, and you've put in 2 holes. We will get to those, but maybe just in a general sense, before we get into the recent drill holes, just talk about the historic work that was done and why you were even going after Qavvik in this drill program.
Yeah, thanks, Shad. So Qavvik, this project, we have 2 zones of mineralization already, but we focused a lot on Tadagac because it just gets complicated to try to isolate and talk about, all the things that we have. But we do have Qavvik, and yes, it was drilled in the Cameco days. So it was discovered in 2009. It was actually our first discovery on the project. Tadagac was actually found a year later. And so we basically did some like kind of wider space, like 25 to 50 meter centers, and kind of poked around in the Qavvik anomaly, about 28 holes in total. A couple were lost in there, so a couple were redrills. And so we had mineralization. It wasn't quite as high grade as Tadagac. So we did focus more on Tadagac. And, we really wanted to get back there and highlight that we also have this other zone of mineralization. We were drilling at a very steep angle there at Qavvik for a couple reasons. One, I was kind of just following the lead from what I knew from Orano. A lot of the drilling they do is very steep drill holes, and also the stratigraphy at Qavvik is quite flat lying, so it just made sense. But the result of that was kind of these steep lenses. It's kind of similar structural style to Tadagac, and you're kind of hitting the mineralization, and then you're kind of missing it because you got just these steep dispersed lenses. So the point was, I guess, twofold for Forum, was to get back in there, get our own holes, and kind of showcase that, we have significant mineralization at this other zone as well that needs expansion and understanding. And then also to drill it, again, kind of more at an optimal angle, show how many lenses are actually involved in this system.
Well, let's dive into hole number 1 that you put out from this year's program. 296 meters wide of mineralization, and you said that there's 20 discrete lenses in there. So these different segments that have the higher grade uranium and radioactivity levels. There's some nice hits in here, a lot of them over 1%, but then obviously the headline hole coming in, that 0.5 meters over 8.2% U3O8. So walk us through what you learned by drilling it at that more shallow angle.
Yeah, so drilling it at a more shallow angle. And so basically, from the previous drilling, we knew that we had kind of a lower kind of main lens. And then in a few of the holes, we were hitting some mineralization at surface, basically at surface. So there's about 5 meters of till, and then you would start hitting mineralization. So essentially doing this hole, we went through all that upper lens stuff that I didn't really know about before, and hit significant mineralization near surface. And then also that lower lens, went down at 300 meters. And so the whole intercept was a lot. And so basically in and out of high grade mineralization for almost 300 meters. And then, yeah, like you said, then you hit these little high grade lenses, and they vary. So some of these intersections, 10 centimeters, 30 centimeters, up to a meter, and then a little bit beyond, you hit these higher grade pockets, and then you go back into kind of just elevated, lower radioactivity and lower mineralizations, and then you get a little pocket of rock that is background, and then you get into it again, and it went for a whole, like I said, 296 meters.
Well, when you look at it, there's even some nice sections like almost 5 meters of 0.82% U3O8, but then within there, a zero point 0.1 meter chunk that's almost 8%, 7.92% U3O8. Like you say, you get into it, then you get into another high grade chunk, and then you get into it, another high grade chunk. So when you think about these stacked lenses, these discrete mineralized packages, how does that compare to what you would see at your neighbor's property at Orano at their Qavvik project?
I think very comparable. And so especially their Andrew Lake deposit. And that's their bigger one. So like that whole the Qavvik project consists of, three deposits, Andrew Lake being one of them. And in the kind of style of mineralization and the width of it, that you have basically mineralization almost at surface going down past 300 meters. It's very similar to that system. And then, yeah, the other point to make about those grades is back from the historical drilling, the highest intersection was about 5.5% or 5% over around 30 centimeters. So we hit higher grades in this hole, which is just super encouraging because from the past it was like, well, Qavvik, obviously thick, you got mineralization, but you weren't getting these really higher grades. And so it just shows the potential there that, maybe we got some grades comparable to even Tatagak in this area.
Yeah, it's always nice to see higher grades, Rebecca, but it's
Yeah,
also nice to see that there was a lot of them. It wasn't just one little area. There was
yeah.
lens after lens after lens. Now you did put in a second hole, so at COV 24002, maybe just describe where hole one was going and where hole two was going so people have some orientation.
Yeah, for hole one was to cut across kind of the known area, or not well known, but that we had some sniffs and cut across, well, like I said, through potential upper mineralization. So mineralization, I mean, between surface and 150, and then intersecting that lower lens that we inferred was down there from the previous drilling. And then Cav 2 was basically just to step back, not through the upper lens, but to actually intersect that lower lens and expand it a bit to the east. So it was kind of a little bit of an extension and also to hit that lower lens, which we did. So both these holes were very successful and more exceeded our expectations because we had, much higher grade intersected and then such a significant upper package.
Well, and when you look at Qavvik now, in lieu of the historic data that you already had and then these two new holes, any new insights when you combine these new holes with the historic data?
Yeah, so now I think, as with Tatagak, like, I think we're ready to start, putting together a resource. And I think we're at the same sort of stage with Qavvik, is to start, putting together like how big is this thing that we have, knowing now that we have these, significant upper lenses as well as that lower lens. And then moving on from there. And so the other component is, yeah, there's 20 holes into this zone. But basically, now knowing kind of the orientation of this package, it's to the northeast and the same trend to the southwest. We didn't do any holes. So it's completely unknown and open to expand this zone. And it's well within the gravity anomaly. And also one of the differences here to Tatagak is that Tatagak has that, within that granite body, and then you get those thermopolitic kind of rafts, and then the mineralization just, wants to be in those rafts, in those structures, and it's kind of confined to that zone of metapelite. But the exciting thing about Qavvik is that there is no confinement. Like the whole stratigraphy is that fertile samopolitic package. And so we don't even know if it goes deeper. Like a lot of holes with Cameco, we lost just because they're eventually lost at depth because there is a lot of clay. These are can be challenging drilling and stuff like that. So there's a lot more extension and drilling that can be done also deeper than the 300 meters to see what's going on.
Yeah, so Qavvik very much open at strike and depth, and it's not as limited based on the geological structure as maybe Tatagak, but both projects growing and expanding with this year's program, and you're looking towards wrapping some initial resources around both areas. But let's also remind people, Rebecca, that you've already put in a couple holes. You're waiting on the assays back from a couple of targets that are looking for unconformity style. So the last two we've talked about, Tadagak and Qavvik, are basement-hosted deposits. But you're looking to see and test the thesis if the Thelon Basin also has unconformity type of mineralization like you see in the Athabasca Basin. And you got a couple targets, Ned, Loki, and Ira, where you poke some holes to kind of test the structure. Maybe tell us about those holes and when you expect to see those come back in.
Yeah, so I'm excited about the whole project, but I really like this blue sky testing, and it's something that I really wanted to get to even in the Cameco days because it's that whole overarching thesis about the Thelon Basin. And, we've got so far the mineralization that's been discovered to date is these basement hosted systems. And so that's what Orano has, and that's our Qavvik and Tadagak. But the big upside for this project is these kind of unconformity contacts. So, just below the sandstone or at that interface between the sandstone basin and the basement is where you get really high grades. And that's the same thing in the Athabasca. Like that's what they chase for really, really good deposits. So yeah, so we have those results now back from the lab. And so within the next 2 weeks, I think we'll be putting out, our results there. And yeah, we'll be talking about kind of the alteration and the geochem that we see there, which I think is very exciting. And it's kind of getting to that stage where we're going to be showing that those systems that just like the Athabasca are happening. And it's just a matter of time before we find something really interesting up here.
All right. Well, I know you have a lot of other targets that you've not even tested yet along that same line of thinking, looking for those unconformity deposits. But usually it starts with understanding the structure, then vectoring in to look for the radioactivity, and then eventually finding the structure plus the radioactivity plus the uranium. So it's a process, but exciting to see you testing the thesis in the Thelon Basin and a lot of good work that's been happening from last year's drill program. But thank you for walking us through the Qavvik area today, which is another area of growth, and we'll be looking forward to seeing how that turns into a resource in the future. And for people listening in, if you want to follow along with the news and watch out for those next set of results, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you right over to the Forum Energy Metals website, straight to their news section where you can sign up for updates or just follow the news as it's released on the wires. And until next time, Rebecca, always looking forward to our next conversation. We'll catch you when those next set of results come out.
Sounds great.